We are now officially live.
Soti everyone, and welcome to our weekly online Dhamma group with Venerable Dhammo, who's joining us from Sri Lanka in the Meditation Center, and the online Sri Mangalo community. Today we will continue our study of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta for 1 hour, and afterwards we will have discussion and Q&A. We will begin today's session by taking refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha and accept the 5 precepts together. And we do this every week to get into the right mindset for the study group and also to remind ourselves of the basic principles of morality. It is still the same formula as it was during the Buddha's time, and by reciting it, one declares themselves a Buddhist. The observance of the 5 precepts is the minimum standard necessary to form the basis of a decent life and of further progress towards Nibbana. Is there someone in our Discord group who would like to lead the precepts for us?
I would.
Okay, thank you, Edith.
Aham Bhante Tisaranena Saha Pancha Silani Yachami Dutiyampi Aham Bhante Tisaranena Saha Pancha Silani Yachami Tatiyampi Aham Bhante Tisaranena Saha Pancha Silani Yachami.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tisarana gamanang nititang.
Ama Bhante.
Anatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Natipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kamesu michachara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kamisu michachara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Surameraya majjapamadatthana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Sura meraya majja pamadatthana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Imani pancha sikkhapadani silena sugating yanti silena bhoga sampada silena nibbutting yanti tasma silang visodhaye.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So we will continue now with the reading of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. And we are currently at the story of Queen Ubari. So we already started, and I think we are kind of in the middle of that story now, which is on page 118 of the physical copy and 128 of the PDF. And the sentence which we start with, the paragraph starts with those favored by fortune. Since the last reader was Sanda, and we go by alphabetical order, I think it would be you, Venerable Siri Chando, who would start today, and the rest of the list I will write shortly in the chat. Before we start, also please remember to read 2 paragraphs each, and read slowly and carefully, and leave a short pause between each paragraph, so we can digest the contents and maybe ask questions. Feel free to ask questions, so you don't have to hesitate. And if you have done the at-home course, please send a request so we can invite you to speak on stage. Okay.
Those favored by fortune, who enjoy privileges of wealth, family, education, rank, physical beauty, etc., are prone to exhibit haughtiness in their dealings with others. Shrouded in their own vanity and self-esteem, they become negligent in their performance of meritorious deeds. Humility plays no part in their psyche. The Blessed One taught in the Lesser Discourse on the Analysis of Kamma, the Chula Kamma Vipanga Sutta, that such vainglorious, haughty persons are liable to be reborn in lowly, inferior existences. On the other hand, unpretentious persons who show humility and pay due respects to those deserving of homage will be born in noble families.
So we're in the middle of the story of Queen Ubari. It was a cliffhanger last week. The Buddha dropped a shocking statement saying that she was reborn as a dung beetle. So this the queen passed away, and the king mourned her loss and wanted to know where she had gone. It was sad that he would not be able to join her until he passed away, and he was thinking, oh, she must be waiting for me up in some high heaven or something. And really not feeling the will to go on as a human, because he was thinking about his queen. and when he would get to see her again. So the Bodhisattva was a hermit, and he said, well, I can help him see his queen again. And so he came down from the mountains to the palace in the park, and the king found out and came to see him and said, where's my wife? And he said, oh, well, she's right here, actually. She hasn't gone anywhere. You can see her imminently.
Queen Ubari of our story was extremely beautiful, and being the chief queen of the ruling monarch was of very high status in life. Her head was turned by these preeminent qualities, so she looked down with contempt on those to whom she should have shown respect. For such unwholesome attitudes and actions, it may be presumed she was reborn as a female dung beetle. On hearing this account of rebirth of his beloved queen as a female beetle, King Asaka promptly rejected it, saying, I don't believe it.
The hermit replied, I can show you the female beetle and make her talk too. The king said, all right, please do so and make her talk too. The hermit used his supernormal powers to make both the male and female beetles appear before the king. When the male and female beetles emerged from the heap of cow dung into the presence of the king, the hermit said, O king, the female beetle which is following from behind was your chief queen, Ubari. Having abandoned you, she is now trailing the male dung beetle wherever he goes. O king, have a good look at the female beetle who was your chief queen, Ubari.
The king refused to believe the hermit. I can't believe that such an intelligent being as my queen Ubari was reborn as this female beetle, said the king. It is only natural for those who do not believe in the laws of karma and its effects, who do not understand the principles of conditionality or causal relations, as explained in the law of dependent origination. It would be difficult to accept that a being of the human world could have gone down so low as to become a mere dung beetle. Even in the days when the Buddha's teachings are widely prevalent, there are some who hold the view. When a man dies, he cannot descend into an existence inferior to that of a human being. It is not surprising, then, that during the Dark Ages, when the Buddha's dispensation was unheard of, such stories were received with skepticism.
Yeah, so there are people who latch on to the idea of rebirth, reincarnation, and romanticize it. with the idea that there's some lesson to be learned and that it's somehow there's a plan still behind it. I would think the universe has a plan, and I'm learning as I go, and it's I'm here because of some lesson I have to learn or so on. It's not quite so romantic as that. You don't necessarily learn anything. Sometimes you just what's the word? You get stuck in filth and you just stay in the filth.
Nevertheless, according to the teachings of the Buddha, as long as one has not yet attained the status of a noble one can descend from the human world or the celestial realm into the 4 lower realms of existence, as conditioned by unwholesome karma and the mental reflex just before death. On the other hand, conditioned by wholesome karma and wholesome mental attitude on the threshold of death, ascent may be made from an inferior sphere of existence into the higher realm of human and celestial beings.
Wallowing was the word I was looking for. We wallow in our filth.
There is the story of a bhikkhu named Tissa who developed attachment to his robes when he was about to die. As a consequence, he was reborn a louse, making its home in those very robes. There is another story of a frog who met its death while listening to a discourse by the Buddha. He became a celestial being in Dhammacakkappavattana. These are just a few examples that serve as evidence of various transformations at the time of rebirth.
So these don't actually serve as evidence, but what he's saying is that for Buddhists, they serve as evidence. Someone might say that in Buddhism, we don't believe that you can be born as an animal or an animal could be born as a human. Someone could have this wrong view. And so the evidence he's pointing out is that, well, these people are wrong. That in Buddhism, we do have the doctrine that an animal can become a human can become an animal. And given the acceptance of rebirth, it of course makes much more sense to think that way, because you're dealing with a diversity of mental qualities. So not everyone has the quality of a human being, the mental quality of a human being. So the minds of some people are clearly very much different from the ordinary state of a human being, which is one of heightened mental capacity, capacity for compassion, kindness, friendliness, potential for peace, quietude of mind. But how many people don't have this, have fallen into a state of intense greed, intense anger, intense delusion? The people who are deeply mired in delusion are much more likely to be born as animals. People who are keen on their ignorance, who are obsessed with intoxication, who are deeply arrogant or conceited, proud, belligerent, these sorts of things. People who are angry and deeply mired in anger, who are hateful, spiteful, hurtful, violent, are much more likely to be reborn in hell. People who are consumed by greed, addiction, and attachment are much more likely to be born as a hungry ghost. I mean, it relates to the weight of their inclinations. So if at the moment of death they're They have strong enough greed, anger, and delusion to make them break the 5 precepts, let's say. Kind of the line. And it's reasonable to think they're going to be reborn in the lower realms. And likewise, if an animal, by some freak chance, is able to cultivate compassion, kindness, and give up killing, give up stealing, give up wallowing in the mud, it's possible for animals to become humans or even devas in very rare cases, usually through connection with humans. So dogs, cats, probably quite likely that owners and their pets switch places quite often, as well as farm animals switching places with the farmers that butcher them, that sort of thing. It just makes, I mean, if you have the idea that rebirth is true, it's much easier to explain if you appreciate that it's not just about being a human being, because the human state is quite limited, and someone with intense evil or intense goodness doesn't really belong here. It doesn't resonate. People who are very good are the same, have a hard time living in the human realm. They'll, this only the good die young actually has some truth to it. Some truth, because it's hard for them to live on this earth. It's hard for them to be successful. It's hard for them to always get what they want because they can't manipulate and harm others to get what they want. So they can suffer as a result in this life as a human. They don't really belong in this realm, which is very mixed. The human state is somewhere in the middle. If you're too good, you don't belong here. If you're too bad, you also don't belong here. Human state is just one of many states, and it's a very specific sort of state that requires a mind that is decidedly middling.
However, King Akasa, not having heard such discourses, could not accept that his queen had become a female beetle. Accordingly, he refused to believe it. The hermit therefore proposed that he would make the female beetle talk. Accepted the proposal. Thereupon, the hermit made the vow, using his supernormal powers, to have the conversation between him and the female beetle comprehensible to the king and his audience. Who were you in your past life? The hermit asked. I was the chief queen of Ubari of King Akasa, replied the female beetle. What now, female beetle? Do you still love King Akasa, or do you love only this dung beetle? To this, the female beetle replied, True, the Akasa king was my husband in my past life. At that time, I used to roam about in this garden, in his company, enjoying the 5 sense pleasures. However, now that I am in the new existence, I have nothing to do with King Akasa.
Remember, this whole section is why is he going on? He's on about this is because we're in the section on the cause of suffering, relating to how we find delight here or there. That the cause of our suffering is our craving, our thirst, our yearning for more. And it's a yearning that doesn't have any any rhyme or reason, doesn't have any boundaries. A person who found delight as a human being, they would be disgusted by the idea of a dung beetle in a heap of cow dung. But as soon as they're born a dung beetle, they delight. Tatra tatra binandini, delighting here and there, wherever we're born.
The version of the female beetle's reply in the commentary is as follows. In my present existence, I would relish killing King Asaka, and with the blood from his throat, washing the feet of the dung beetle, who is my present beloved husband. This exposition makes the beetle's reply sound very harsh and unfeeling, but as she was talking in the presence of her dear husband, the male beetle, it is natural that she wanted to please him. We can easily see in everyday life many conspicuous examples of estrangement between couples who get separated not through death, but in this very life on grounds of incompatibility, and examples of loving tenderness heaped on their new partners. The remarks in the commentary appears therefore to be quite in order.
It's true, it's very easy to fall out of love, into love and out of love. It's kind of doesn't have much rhyme or reason. Some people will yearn and pine for their partners. Others will just snap. And once it's snapped, you can't go back. Even in this life, you'll see that. Or if a couple breaks up and it's just what was profound devotion becomes revulsion, abhorrence. The reason for it isn't anything mysterious. It's that there is no rhyme or reason to love. It's just a switch in the brain. If you're able to trick your brain into liking something else like this, you can apply all of that desire towards someone else. And so the brain can be tricked. Sometimes you're in a relationship with someone, you see someone else, and suddenly the switch gets switched in your mind, and suddenly the same desire is applied, or that desire is shifted to the new person, and suddenly it's impossible for you to stay in a relationship with the old. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but it is interesting how in this life you see people devoted and then suddenly hating each other. Why they say, not in Buddhism, but those people in the world say that love and hate are close to each other or something, or two sides of the same coin. Maybe that's what they say. There is something very Buddhist about that. It's not love, but attachment. You know, the word love is ambiguous, but the attachment part of it, and you feel so much pleasure from something. Very easy to have that thing give rise to anger when it doesn't provide you with that pleasure for whatever reason. It changes, you change. You can have the craving is a catalyst for so much anger and hatred. They are, in a sense, two sides of the same coin.
The Jataka Pali texts describe the female beetle's reply thus: Venerable Sir, I roamed about in this garden many times with King Asaka, who loved me and was my beloved husband then, enjoying each other's company. However, now the joys and troubles of the present life have obscured the joys and troubles of the old life. The new joys and troubles having transcended the old joys and troubles, I love my present husband, the male dung beetle, more than I did King Asaka.
There is another lesson in there to be careful not to let grudges break up relationships and friendships. We don't have to limit this to romantic engagements, but it's not the lesson he's teaching here, but it's a lesson as Buddhists to not give meaning to our love for others. So you hear about people having soulmates and their true love and this sort of thing, and it's not, it has no meaning whatsoever. It comes from often past life connections, right? So you can be sure that if you have a strong connection with someone in a past life, all you have to do is meet them in this life and you can have the same sort of strong attachment to them. I mean, but even that can quickly change into hatred. And it's important not to give meaning to either the love we have for others or the hatred we have towards them. Otherwise, you find yourself in the situation where a grudge, someone does something, when someone changes or acts in a way that is not according to your expectations, can lead to very strong grudges against people that you give meaning to, and you think, this is my enemy. We should never think of anyone in the world as our enemy. And likewise, we should not prefer anyone to say, this person is my dear friend, or that sort of thing. There's no benefit to it. It's not better to have people we love and people we hate. It's better to be friendly and kind towards all beings. And if you think like that, you're able to think of it in terms of mental qualities and recognize when you have a grudge towards someone and not take it as a hatred of that person, you know. Take it as a flaw in yourself, that you are angry and you have anger in yourself. Now, of course, you can avoid people who are evil, but that's not what we're talking about here. Grudges are not the same as avoiding someone because they're evil, because many people in the world, again, are destined for hell, destined for the lower realms, and you just really have to just stay out of their way because there's not much help you can give to them, and you'll suffer a lot if you get caught up in their evil, polluted qualities of mind. But as far as holding grudges, it's very easy to become irrational, to hate people. And it's very much fed by our preference for certain people. These are my friends, this is my dear friend, my lover, my loved one. Even your family, you prefer your family over people who are not your family. And it becomes very tribalistic, where you are okay with, some cultures are okay with, many cultures are okay with manipulating and cheating people who are outside of their own culture. Of course, it's much more for family. You would not do that to family, but you might easily lie or cheat someone who is not your family. You have less inclination there. So it creates, it helps breed a lot of unwholesomeness to have this sort of partiality and to not have a sense of qualities of mind that you're cultivating. I mean, the same goes within our families, within our loved ones, as they often inspire, again, such great hatred when they don't act the way you want. So married couples often fight bitterly, more bitterly than anyone else. People you're supposed to love the most, you fight, and family members, brothers, sisters, parents fight with children. We all have seen and experienced such horrors of just saying the most terrible things to the ones who you actually love the most. Attachment and aversion are a big deal. But don't give them meaning. It doesn't mean you can stop them from coming, and absolutely you're going to have the strongest emotions of love and hatred towards those who are dearest to you, your family, your parents, your children, your friends, your loved ones, your spouses, and that sort of thing. So you can't deny that, but don't give it meaning. Don't say, this is my friend, this is my enemy. Say, this is my emotion. This is what has arisen, and try to understand and gain some wisdom. Have a higher state of mind that is more clear and more rational, because no one could argue that there's good comes from this intense hatred and animosity that we have towards our family, our friends, our loved ones. It can arise out of it. Or even the hatred towards enemies, cultural groups, the various religious groups in the world who have hatred towards each other, and countries that have hatred towards other countries. Don't give these things meaning. Stay focused on your own qualities of mind and purifying your own mind of the bad qualities.
The commentary's exposition of the words "love more than" makes interesting reading. It says, "Love more than" means love 100 times more, love 1,000 times more, indicating the intensity of love in favor of her new husband. King Asaka was greatly distressed to hear the harsh, unfeeling words from the female beetle. He thought to himself, "I loved and adored her so much that I could not bear to throw away her dead body. However, she has become so antipathetic and nasty to me."
Now the king is experiencing this rapid shift from love to hate. She's not how he expected her to be, and he's immediately going to drop her. Immediately the love disappears.
Although it doesn't seem like he learned from that lesson.
Oh, it sounds like he does, actually. A little bit, anyway.
Okay. Kiki, are you trying to talk? Okay. Yeah, then the next person would be you, Lara.
He felt so disgusted with the late Queen Ubari that even while sitting there, he ordered, "Go and have that woman's body removed." Then, having bathed and washed himself, the king went back to the palace. He made another lady of the court his chief queen and carried on ruling his country wisely. The hermit, the Bodhisattva, after giving good advice to the king, went back to the Himalayan forest. The moral of this story.
It sounds like he says that he started ruling more wisely. Certainly gives perspective. He didn't learn enough to give up a romantic life. Found another queen, but probably had a broader perspective.
I think it's quite curious. Actually, thank you, Bente. It is very enlightening what you said. And I think we focus on the Queen's shift of heart. It is also a mirror on the king himself. It's sort of ridiculous when you think that he has such attachment to a dung beetle. So it's his habit too, regardless of the object of affection.
Oh yeah, we create the objects of affection very much in our minds. They don't actually exist for the most part. I mean, we create this idea of the people around us, sometimes totally out of whack with who they actually are and their actual qualities. He called her intelligent, and it sounds like she wasn't very intelligent. I mean, not a diss on.
What do you
I
mean? I
mean,
don't
it
see
sounds like
anything wrong with it. Sorry, Bante.
even before she became a dung beetle, which is a real giveaway, but even before she became a dung beetle, it says she was vain and not interested in anything good. So to call her intelligent, he had this idea, and this is what happens. We get this idea of a person in our minds. And a lot of it has to do with their physical appearances, so we get attached to their body, and end up keeping them in a glass coffin full of oil.
The moral of this story is that Queen Ubari, while in the human world, had taken delight in being a human being, and a queen at that. She would never even have dreamt of being reborn as a female beetle. However, in accordance with her past karma, when she happened to be reborn as a female beetle, she at once took to the life and delighted in the physical body of a beetle. She esteemed and adored the physical body of the male beetle 100 times, 1,000 times more than that of King Asaka. That she felt quite at home in her lowly existence as a dung beetle is due to craving, which finds delight everywhere. That is why the Buddha said, craving seeks delight now here, now there, tatra tatra binandini.
The lesson is craving has no rhyme or reason. There is no meaning behind a statement of attachment. I like this, I like that, I prefer this, I prefer that. I'm a cat person, I'm a dog person. It has no meaning. And it doesn't actually have any basis in reality. It's just a habit that can change and is far more capricious than we think. We think, I'm this sort of person, this is what I like. Wait until you die and are born a dung beetle and suddenly like, oh yes, this dung, this is what I like. And you couldn't imagine as a dung beetle, you couldn't imagine being a human. That would be awful. No, there's no dung to eat. Imagine how dogs feel about humans. Dogs and cats, they must think us humans are just revolting. We don't sniff each other's rear ends. We don't eat refuse. We don't dig around and roll around in feces. What a horrible life we humans must lead. It's the nature of craving. We're quick. No, look at animals that are born, humans that are born, babies. Look at children. How quick they are to pick up and enjoy their new life as a human being. This life as a human being is 100% pleasure. You look at a kid, you'd think sometimes you would think that's what it is. When they're happy, you'd think that, wow, being a human being is just so much pleasure. Until something bad happens and then they cry and throw a tantrum when they don't get what they want. But wherever we're born, as soon as a dog is born, a cat is born, they immediately become excited about the pleasure of being a cat and a dog, a dung beetle.
A dog takes delight in a dog's existence. If reborn as a pig or a chicken, there is always delight in each existence. Even having been born of affluent parents of the upper social class, there are cases of children sinking down to poverty-stricken existences and yet enjoying their new lives. Some even resisted the efforts of their parents to take them back into the family, since they find their new life quite enjoyable. It is craving again that gives them pleasure wherever they are, delighting in whatever sense object presents itself.
There's another factor in all of this, and that's karma. It's not just random, the sorts of things you're inclined towards. People who like coarser things do so because of a distorted state of mind compared to those people who prefer more refined things. Because there is objectively refined and coarse. I mean, it's not that meaningful, but because karma isn't all that meaningful. Being rich, being poor doesn't have great meaning. But there is a truth to it that people who prefer a coarser life, prefer a life of hardship, or prefer hard work and feel proud about it. It's a real it's because of the corruption of their mind that they prefer the coarser states. So a high-minded person, for example, there's stories of Brahmas, godly beings, being reborn as humans, and they don't immediately take to the human life. They're often revolted by the human life and unable to make romantic connections. We have stories of Brahma coming down to the human realm and just being totally disinclined to engage in romance. In the beginning, there's a story of this boy who is this way because he had come from the Brahma realms. I think it was the Brahma, maybe it was the Deva realms actually. I think it was the Brahma realms though. Yeah, he was a Brahma in his past life, and so as a human he had no sensual desire, not immediately. And he was just repulsed by the idea of taking a wife, and his parents were concerned. And so to get them off his case, he created a statue, and he was very high-minded, his ability to create a likeness of the most beautiful woman one could ever think of. And he said, if you find a woman like this, I will marry her. And so they took this golden statue, the most beautiful golden statue, the most absolutely beautiful human being you could possibly imagine. And they found a woman. So they went to this village, and eventually they came to some village, and people said, oh, why do you have a statue of this girl? And so they found a woman. And once they found her, they sent word back to the family that they found a woman who looks just like, who was as beautiful and almost the identical image of this statue. And when this young man heard this, suddenly something awoke in him, and he became obsessed with the idea of meeting this woman, the idea of having someone so beautiful. It was in his mind because, of course, he sculpted this, or made. How do you make golden statues? I don't know. He had smelted this golden statue. You have to carve it into stone first or something. And he was obsessed with it. But this girl, the long story short, the girl ended up dying before they met. And I don't remember the end of the story, but it completely devastated this young man who had been completely avowed from any sort of romantic involvement. Eventually gave in and started to feel the state of being a human being eventually creep up on him, and the desire for engaging in romance with this woman, and then was denied it and had to feel that the loss of someone he had actually never met.
So it is his good karma that the girl died.
Well, I mean, it's probably something karmic, because I mean, it relates to him being so removed as a Brahma that he doesn't really have a connection. I mean, that sort of, it's just conjecture, but it's the sort of the way of things, because Brahmas are so disconnected that he never really had enough of a connection with any human being to actually meet her. Yeah, I mean, it's just something weird. It's a weird aspect of samsara. Is it good? It's not as good karma. It's good luck that he didn't meet her and have to make more bad karma with her. Perhaps, but that's yeah. Probably you could say it's good luck, good fortune, coincidence that he didn't end up meeting her. It's good fortune that he's able to contemplate the disadvantages of attachment like that. It's his first lesson in attachment, because it's something very new to him.
One thing, was Venerable Kassapa also not a Brahma before he came to the human realm as a monk?
Kassapa is another example. Pipila is his name. Like that. Yes, and so he had the same state where he was not interested, but unlike this young man, Pipila is I don't remember his name exactly. Someone can find it. How you pronounce it? He stuck to it. So he got married, but it turns out his wife, like he had an arranged marriage where his family forced him to get married. Or I can't remember the details, but it was something like that. But it turns out that his wife was of the same sort, and they both ended up leaving the home life. So he, I don't remember the details, but he started acting, or he immediately acted like, he said, "Look, I'm not. You can have this wealth, you can have the home. I'm leaving." And she said, "Oh, if you're leaving, I'm leaving too." And so they both left, but they took different ways. They said, "We can't go together because our celibacy will be in danger. So you go left, I'll go right." She ended up becoming a bhikkhuni. He ended up becoming, I don't remember what her name was. He ended up becoming Kassapa. Pali.
Maybe that also explains his inclination for the ascetic practices. Maybe they're related to the state of a Brahma.
Not really. It's actually more that he made that determination in front of a past Buddha, something like that. The story of Kassapa goes apparently that he made a bodhisattva vow. He intended to become a Buddha. I'm not sure which commentary talks about this, but it's apparently there's the story of how he intended to become a Buddha, but eventually gave it up. I think when he saw our Buddha, he realized that this was the better way. Decided to become a disciple. Because he didn't have any reassurance that he was going to become a Buddha, but he had made this vow to become a Buddha. And he had never gained the reassurance, but that was his path, and that's why he hadn't become enlightened before this. So finally he realized that's enough. This is the better way. I will just become a disciple.
How rebirth takes place. I will now deal with gives rise to fresh rebirth, Bonobhavika, which I earlier postponed considering. Since craving has the nature of delighting and clinging, a being finds delight in whatever existence it is born into and enjoys any sense object that presents itself. Because it finds its existence so delightful and pleasurable, the wish arises for this existence to remain stable and everlasting, and for pleasurable objects to be endurable. In striving to maintain them as one wishes, volitional activities come into play. These volitional activities, kamma, which may be wholesome or unwholesome, are the cause of rebirths in new existences.
I don't think endurable is the word there. Enduring, I think, is what is meant. Pleasurable objects to endure. And so we work and work and work to keep our pleasure and get our pleasure and maintain the pleasurable experiences. Not noticing as the addiction creeps up and the dissatisfaction grows, the capacity for annoyance, frustration, hatred, aversion increases. Not realizing that we're cultivating this bhava, this kama bhava.
Thus, when a person is about to die, one or another of these meritorious or demeritorious actions, kamma, may present itself before the mind's eye, or it may be a sign of the kamma, kamma nimitta, which is any sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, or idea associated with the commission of that kamma, or a sign of destiny, patinimitta, a sign of the next existence where one is destined to begin life, a new life, in consequence of the aforesaid kamma. The kamma, sign of kamma, or sign of destiny, which presents itself to the dying person, is tenaciously grasped because of craving and cannot be dispelled from the mind. Just like the shadows of a mountain thrown by the evening sun, falling on the surface of the land and covering it, so too these sense objects that present themselves at the sense doors completely occupy the mind. They are clung to tenaciously by the deceased thought process, paranasana, otherwise called the kamma forming consciousness, abhisankara vijnana.
The lua, is it time? Should I go on or just stop here?
Actually, it would be Venerable Sri Chando's turn, but I think we can stop still. We can stop here. So, yeah, it's a good time to stop.
Those three, this is actually Buddhist doctrine. Those three are the three things that trigger rebirth. Dhamma, you might remember some deed that you performed, and that begins the process of rebirth for you based on that karma. Or it's a kamma nimitta, so it can be an idea. Often it's a symbol like a knife or blood or something like that for evil deeds, or it's a thing that was given, or it can be a bright light or something like that. No, that wouldn't be it. But something to do with a karma, a good deed that you performed, a gift that you gave, maybe a monk's robe. Some people apparently will see a monk's robe when they die. They've done lots of good deeds, perhaps giving robes and that sort of thing. And gati nimitta is where you start to see your future life. People can have this whole narrative. He's going to talk about that next week. We should see some of these narratives that people remember. Children are able to relate these memories that they had of how they came to the place that they were born. Like actually traveling there by a cart or something like that. Or at any rate, something related to probably a narrative story or vision of your future life.
So that will conclude the reading for today. Thank you for those who were taking part in the reading group. And now is the time for discussion and questions. So everyone on YouTube is welcome to write their questions. And we encourage everyone to ask questions that are sincere, maybe about your meditation practice, but it can be other questions too. If you want to talk about the text in the Discord group, you're also welcome to do that. Or in general, you are welcome to use your microphone. You don't have to hesitate.
Bhante, I had a question regarding the text in the last paragraph that we just read. When it says here, the kamma presents itself to the dying person, does that mean that if one is, let's say, dying of old age, and then one is able, like one knows that one is towards the end, that this presents itself? Or how about someone gets into an accident and this would not present itself?
No, this
Because there's
is
no
well
time.
after. This is well after you've begun to die. This is once the body is already basically dead.
Okay.
And there is this moment of clear vision of something you did during the life that had an impact on your mind and leads you to cling to it strongly enough to give rise to rebirth.
Okay. Thank you.
So, Bante, would enlightened beings have nothing as an object or nibbana as an object at the time of death?
Well, there's these things would potentially still arise. Excuse me. So the same objects would still arise, but there'd be no attachment to them. The mind wouldn't cling to any of them.
Understood. Thank you, Bhante.
And so they would just end. They'd come and they have their opportunity, and there'll be no attachment to them.
If we have someone in the Discord who would like to help us with the questions, and maybe we could need some help because I'm not very well right now.
Okay, I'm coming.
Should I read out some of the questions, Dilawar, in the Discord?
You
I
can.
actually had a question that we could present. The first question, Bhante. When I have a thought of a person who had wronged me in the past and who hurt me and my family, I feel intense hatred and the arising of evil desires. My body also tenses up. What is your advice on dealing with this?
That's a great example. The first step is how you look at it. You have to put aside the idea of the person. The object, because this is the point of what I was saying, the object has no relationship intrinsically to your emotional state. We know this because we have the evidence of people who experience the same sorts of situations and don't react. Especially, those who have cultivated those states of enlightenment, and through the attainment of the stages of enlightenment, have freed themselves from the potential to react in those ways. So there's no meaning between the relationship between your emotions and the actions of other people. You have to separate those out. You understand and you acknowledge that evil is evil. So if someone does evil, that's not something you approve of, not something you condone. And in many cases, not something you tolerate in terms of being around. So you try your best to not associate with evil people. That's clear. But none of that says you have to get angry or upset, that you have to give rise to the hatred. Obviously, you can't stop the hatred. But take it out of your mind that it has anything to do intrinsically with what that person did. It's a you problem. Your problem is that you have hatred, and it's never, that hatred is never going to hurt that other person. The hatred is always going to be a source of suffering for you. What that means is you've made a bad decision. You've made the wrong choice to give rise to anger. And if you take it from that perspective, you can begin to appreciate the importance and the value of cultivating mindfulness, of learning about this hatred and learning about this mistake that you're making, and that you make again and again, that we make moment after moment after moment, again and again, the same mistake. And that's all it is making a mistake. And the reason why we make the mistake is simply because we don't see clearly that it's a mistake, that it's wrong, that it's harmful, that it's hurting us, that it's not just useless, but actually bad, like harmful. And so that's really a description of the practice of mindfulness. You pay attention, you cultivate an objective observation of the experience. And as you do that, you're able to see it clearly and fix your mistake. Stop making the mistake. Why? Simply because you see that it's a mistake. You say, oh no, why would I do that? That's a mistake. You have no inclination. The inclination to act in that way disappears because it was based on faulty perception. The thought that this will be good. If I get angry, this is the right thing to do. This is good for me. We relish the idea of getting angry. We like to hurt ourselves. All it takes is a little bit of clarity of mind, and you'll see that you're hurting yourself. And you'll teach yourself to stop getting angry. I don't know if you read our booklet on how to meditate. I mean, all these things I'm saying are just conceptual. I'm giving you ideas. But the concrete steps are to actually put into practice the cultivation of mindfulness. We have a booklet on how to meditate. That's where we encourage people to start. And then we have an at-home course you can do to support your daily practice of mindfulness, your daily training, and how to see things clearly. And if you're really dedicated, you can come to our center and pick up intensive practice. So, I mean, I could go into detail about my advice, but really you should just read the booklet and start to learn how to practice mindfulness, because you need to gain this skill and an appreciation of the skill before it makes any sense what I would say to you. Do that, and if you have already done that, then well, just apply those very principles. Removing yourself from the idea of this person and what they've done to you, because that's a separate issue. That just means stay away from them, or don't encourage them, don't get involved with them, don't praise them for their evil, of course. That's all that means. As far as your own emotions, well, that's something actually completely different, because it's your propensity to react in that way. It has nothing to do with this specific instance that makes you hate. It's your capacity for hatred that is interesting and of importance.
Here's the next question, Bante. Regarding the king and female beetle story, if one never really enjoys social gatherings or parties, never feels belonging to any events, a marriage life, any cultural activities, or not wishing to have any material richness in this human life, but is okay with being alone and mostly content with basic needs, does it mean this person doesn't fit in the human realm?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, most likely, I want to say yes, but those really aren't the most important non-human qualities. Non-human is more how good you are, how bad you are. If you're a terrible person, if you're living alone because you hate people and you just wish they all would suffer terribly or meet with catastrophe or that sort of thing, and yes, you that hatred means you don't belong. On the other hand, you prefer peace. You're looking for clarity of mind, depth of, even if it's not Buddhist, but you're looking for some peace of mind, and you much more likely belong in heaven or in one of the Brahma realms or that sort of. And for the most part, what you're talking about sounds very wholesome, very pure. The human realm is not very pure. I mean, if you look at this body, the body is impure. It's a sign of how you don't relate to the body. I mean, our body has smells, and it has experiences of sensations of heat and cold, and it gets sick, and it excretes urine and feces and sweat and snot and earwax. So if your mind gets very pure, you won't be reborn in this state again. Our mind has the sexual organs. It has, it is primed for a certain inclination, and that's why we're born as a human being. The importance of what I was saying was just to talk about the diversity of paths, the diversity of destination. We're not all going to be reborn as a human being. Human being isn't the default. It isn't where everybody goes. In fact, most are probably not destined to be reborn as human beings. Far more are likely to fall back down to be or reborn as animals. Rare to be born a human being.
One thing before, sorry for commenting so late. This also kind of sounds like to me, and maybe I'm just going into unnecessary details, to identify with I don't fit in the human realm. And again, doing what we were talking about earlier. Or going in that direction.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to be clear, just because you don't belong in the human realm doesn't mean you're on the path to enlightenment. I was more referring to the people who have conceit can still be reborn in the Deva realms and in the Brahma realms. Attachment to self. You just need to be for the angel realms. You have to have sensual purity, meaning you have to be kind and doing good deeds on a sensual realm. To be born as a god, as a Brahma, you have to do good deeds on a meditative realm. So just have a very pure and peaceful mind, a very calm and not pure isn't the best word, but yeah, states of mind that are pure anyway. Just very strong states of trance and absorption and tranquility meditation. But neither of those is directly related to attaining enlightenment. They're just somewhat unlike the human realm, or well, quite unlike the realm of human.
The next question, Bante. Regarding today's topic, how should one see marriage instead?
Well, depends your frame of reference. Marriage is actually it's considered to be one of the holy, a spiritual practice. To be content, the spiritual practice is to be content with your spouse. And so the point is that without a spouse, you exist in a realm of animalistic engagement in romance and sexuality, without any rhyme or reason, without any rules. Getting married is actually imposing rules. It's actually not saying to yourself, I'm going to engage more in sensuality. It's putting limits and restrictions on it. And so the Buddha called this I think it was the Buddha, we have this teaching that it is one of the spiritual practices. Be content with your spouse, because it's a limit. It's saying, yes, I am too weak to give up. I mean, there's no shame in it. It's very difficult. It's a very challenging thing to do. I'm not able to give up sensual pleasure, so I will do it in a way that structures it so that it is not unlikely to give rise to great intoxication and chaos and pollution of mind. And so I will confine it to my relationship with my romantic partner, my spouse. So in that sense, it's actually a very good thing. So that on that level, there are of course other reasonable benefits to marriage. There are economic benefits, practical benefits. There's the protection that comes from being a team. You can protect each other from danger, supporting each other in times of need, sickness. It really is quite a potentially valuable engagement. So there's nothing practically wrong in a worldly sense with marriage. Of all the alternatives, marriage is probably the best. Monogamy is probably the best because there's much less potential for chaos. And then that part of your life, you just designate this is where this takes place, with this partner. This is where romance occurs. Simple, it's confined, and it's a neat box in your life kind of thing. Of course, it's not very neat and tidy for the most part, but that's for other reasons, because we're not content and because we're not patient with our partners. I mean, I think that's just how you should look at marriage. Of course, without going further into saying that, well, eventually marriage becomes something of very little meaning and probably something you're better to abandon as well. As advice for those who are dedicated to practicing the Buddha's teaching and who are comfortable facing their sensual desire directly without having to give in to it.
Bhante, here is the next question. When following the 8 precepts, is it allowed to drink a protein powder drink after noon?
So it's not, but many places you go allow for that sort of thing. But we don't. I've kind of gotten pretty orthodox about how we run things here. So, I mean, I'm not really pushy about it, but we will tell people that according to the 8 precepts, in the afternoon, all you can have is liquid of a certain sort, and that sort is fruit juice, root juice, leaf juice, root juice, just that root juice, fruit juice, leaf juice, flower juice. Flower juice, I think. I can't remember. No, that's not. Root juice, fruit juice, leaf juice. I think that's it. Anyway, it's basically vegetable and fruit juice, and it can only be the liquid, not the actual pulp. And that's it. That's all you're allowed. Coffee and tea you shouldn't have in the afternoon. I mean, there are instances where other liquids like that could be used as a medicine. Anything that's a medicine can be taken at any time, provided you're sick and you need that medicine. Almost anything, not anything, but most things. If someone is sick, there are great exceptions.
Bhante, here is the next question that we have. Is it correct that the chair is just a concept, while hardness, softness, and awareness are real? And Venerable, what makes them related, and what is the nature of their connection?
So the first question's simple enough. I mean, you basically got it. And it's important to understand why the one is real and one is not real is because it's part of experience. Reality in Buddhism is confined to experience. And this isn't unique to Buddhism. I often remark about how this is what Descartes got very famous for realizing. He did this thought experiment where he acknowledged that anything he claimed to be real and true could ultimately just be a trick. Maybe there's some malevolent God tricking us into thinking that we see this or we see that, thinking that we see the chair. And if we were to touch it, maybe it would disappear, or maybe it would trick us into thinking we feel it, trick us into thinking we're touching the chair. And so he tried to figure out, is there anything I can be sure of? And he realized that experience cognition is indisputable. You can't be tricked into thinking you're experiencing, right? Into experiencing a false experience, because it requires experience. Experience is real in a way that nothing else is. And this isn't, I mean, Descartes, of course, had his own reasons for going into this, but the reason why this is important in Buddhism is because if it's real, you can actually observe it. The only things you can observe are real. Scientists do all their observation, I mean, material scientists, modern material scientists, do all of their observation indirectly. So that there's processing involved. And as a result, yes, you can gain practical knowledge. You can learn how to create nuclear bombs, nuclear power plants. You can do incredible things in a worldly sphere, but you can't become enlightened based on that sort of knowledge. It doesn't resonate. It doesn't allow you to change your behavior. It doesn't allow you to see what you're doing wrong in a way that which is real does. When you pay attention to hardness and softness, you get to see how your mind is interacting with that hardness and softness, because it's real, because it's really happening. It's something you can directly observe. If you look on a microscope at a cell, you're not actually seeing a cell, you're seeing light, and then you process in your mind. It requires conceptualization, which the problem with conceptualization is it's imaginary, it's infinite. You can conceptualize anything. There's nothing stopping you. There's nothing pushing back and saying, no, it's like this. When you say it's like something, you can describe it in any way you like. There's no feedback. When you pay attention to reality, when you focus on the actual experience, you get immediate feedback. You see how this anger, this greed, this delusion, this is causing stress, this is causing suffering. You can see that immediately. So this is why a lot of our discourse revolves around being able to differentiate between reality and concept. As far as what makes things related, we're not really into relations and connections. I mean, the Buddha did talk about relations and connections, but it's not really a part of our practice. The connection that you make is that this causes stress and this causes suffering, or this frees me from stress, this frees me from suffering. That's really the only connection that you have to make. And ultimately, even that's not the goal. The goal is to see the nature of things as they are. Seeing things as they are breaks the connection, because it frees you from the craving and the clinging and the attachment and expectations. You just know things are the way they are, instead of expecting them to be a certain way, or hoping them for them to be a certain way.
Bhante, here is the next question. I understand that mindfulness is the way to overcome addiction, but when it actually comes to the moment of intense craving, there is no wanting to be mindful of the object. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, it takes work, it takes practice. You can start at any time. The craving is something you can note sometimes. The pleasure is something you can note sometimes. The object of the pleasure is something you can note sometimes. Don't expect it to fix your problem, but it does open your mind. It broadens your horizon, helps. It gives you better perspective on the experience. But ultimately, it takes training. If you really want to see results, it takes intensive training. If you want to see a real benefit from the practice, this is why we're always encouraging and pushing for intensive practice. This is why we've come all this way to Sri Lanka to set up a meditation center in the forest. Not living in the forest just for our own peace of mind. We're living here to provide a facility to allow people to train in the way that you're asking about. You really need to be vigilant and cultivate the qualities of mindfulness and wisdom intensively. It's not something that it's easy to do in the world. Because if you think you're not just randomly experiencing craving, you're constantly being bombarded with the objects of your attachment, your objects of your desire. So coming to the forest is a peaceful way of confronting your desires without constantly having them triggered and having them fed by things around you. Big reason why intensive practice is important, and why the meditation center is so valuable, because it takes you away from sorts of things that are going to disrupt your mindfulness.
Here is the next question, Bhante. Since I moved away from the sitting bench to formal sitting meditation, after 20 minutes I am starting to experience a sleepy leg, and after another 10 minutes, it's almost impossible to focus on the rising and falling, just on the pain, on the desire to move the leg, etc. It's quite frustrating because, with the bench, I could easily meditate for 1 hour without any uncomfortable physical sensations. What can you tell me about this?
Well, if you lay down on your bed or sat in an easy chair, you could also do the same, right? If you just didn't meditate, you could also find ways to experience peaceful, blissful states. That's not the point of mindfulness. So at the outset, it's actually much more potentially beneficial that you're now struggling. Because you're not struggling either with the sitting or even with the pain. You're struggling with the mind that craves what it isn't able to get, which is the whole point of our practice, is to see this. The blame doesn't lie on the practice, it lies on the mind that is unable to tolerate a new experience. It prefers, and it's not even just the craving, it's also probably a sort of view that was better, that was good practice. There can be even conceit. That was better, that I was a really good meditator, and now you feel like it's just threatened. I thought I was a really good meditator, and now if I do it like this, I can see I don't have that feeling of being such a good meditator. There can be even conceit. So there's great benefit in being forced to confront something that you find uncomfortable. Discomfort, or being uncomfortable, being taken out of your comfort zone, is an important part of mindfulness practice. Important, an essential part. If you're not taking it out of your comfort zone, you'll never change. You'll never let go. You can't enter into it thinking, I'm going to be perfect, and then something good is going to happen. Unless you focus on the ways that you're not perfect, that perfection will never truly be perfect. With that being said, when the pain becomes intolerable, it's okay to change postures, especially as sort of a a temporary measure, stopgap measure. So until you become able to face head-on the experiences, and until your body stretches as well, you can just move mindfully. Just say wanting to move, move your hand moving, touch the leg touching, when you push the leg pushing, that sort of thing. You also have to be able to separate a sleep state from the painful state. Because what do you say? Experience a sleepy leg. Well, okay, but that's not pain. Be clear that that's actually not an issue. I mean, it's only mentally an issue that people sometimes worry about, and you shouldn't worry about it. It's not harmful to you to have that sleepy leg. So when you're worried about it, you have to note that, and when you feel the numb leg, just say numb a few times, but you don't have to wait for it to go away. Just go back to the rising falling. What we're mostly interested in is the pain, because the pain is the sort of thing that you're going to react to. If you dislike the pain, make sure you separate that and note the disliking first. Say to yourself, disliking. When there is no disliking, try to just note the pain by itself. Pain, until it goes away. Learn to see the pain clearly without reacting to it. Change your relationship with pain. Stop seeing the pain as the problem. The problem isn't the pain, it's that you dislike it. And you dislike it because you don't see it clearly. If you saw it clearly, the pain wouldn't disturb you, it wouldn't upset you. It just takes practice to see more clearly and to see where the problem lies. To see the stress and suffering comes not from the pain, but from the disliking of it. Try and pay better attention to see that, and over time, there's great value in that. I mean, obviously, if you can get to the point where you stop disliking pain, it would be revolutionary. It's life-changing. Anyone in chronic pain who practices mindfulness can tell you it just changes their life drastically for the better.
Bante, would you say it's a bit of a separate question related to that for persistent experiences like pain, but it can be anything really. When you, after a long time, when you go back to the rising and falling, and it pulls your attention again, and then you go back to that persistent experience, and after a long time you go back to the rising and falling again, that it's more about that the pull after a while gets lesser, because it's like a juggling. And would it be correct to describe it in this way, that even though you go back to it again and you try to go back to the rising and falling, that slowly this pull will get lesser and lesser?
I mean, you should still note the pain no matter what. It's not a matter of only noting pain early on in your practice and eventually you don't have to note it. Anytime you notice it, you should note it. What usually happens is once your mind starts to relax and let go, is the pain is much more liable to disappear. New meditators often doubt that it will ever disappear, and they expect for it to last the whole session. Sometimes they don't even notice when it does disappear, and they just think it's always there. But as you pay better attention, you will see it disappear, and the relaxing of the body, because of the relaxing of the mind, will ensure that it disappears more often. It's important to get to that state where you stop disliking it, stop judging it. Because the disliking, of course, exacerbates it, makes the body more painful. Creates great tension, stress.
I just want to emphasize on how much I appreciate the practice for its flexibility, maybe. I don't know if that's the best word, but you're really no restricted in no sense, because if that becomes your practice, then that's your new thing. I don't know. I think that's just so great about the noting technique.
Bhante, here is the next question that we have. Regarding worry, I forget things, have distractions, and have various intentions. So far, I've only been worrying to keep myself in line by preventing bad stuff and thinking about bad consequences. What's a better approach?
I don't understand this question at all. Regarding worry, what does forgetting things, having distractions, and having various intentions have anything to do with worry? You worry about forgetting things? You worry about those things? Is that what you're saying?
I just took the question as it was pretty much, and I interpreted it as if you forget things, then you tend to do those things that you should not forget to be the wrong things. Like, I'm not sure if that makes even sense, but that's kind of how I understand it.
I think we should just address the worry, because that's obviously the most important aspect of whatever this is. Preventing thinking about bad consequences. No, preventing bad stuff by thinking about bad consequences. So you worry as a defense mechanism. Well, obviously it's not a very good one. Not a very valuable approach. Try and take a better approach of noting the worry. Focus on the worry instead of using it as a weapon. It's not your weapon. It's your burden. You can't just stop. We think, I'm worrying and I have a reason for worrying. You think you're actually intentionally worrying. Well, try to stop. Try to be mindful of the worrying, and you'll notice that it actually just keeps coming and coming and coming and coming and coming by again and again and again. It comes back again and again. So make sure you note the worry. Say to yourself, worried, worried. And when it comes again, say worried, worried again. When you think about something that triggers the worry, try to catch the thought. Say thinking, thinking. I don't know if you've read our booklet on how to meditate. That's a good place to start. We have an at-home course if you're interested in getting serious about it. And we have intensive courses if you're really interested in changing your life.
Bhante, here is the next question. How can something so little, like noting hearing right now, have such a revolutionary big impact? I am a bit discouraged because I think I'm not doing as much as I should. Still, I try whenever I can. Can you please offer me advice?
Well, it works because it replaces what's not working. It replaces the problem. We're constantly reacting, responding to experiences. We're interpreting experiences. So the noting isn't actually anything new. It's just a replacement. When you see something, you think it's good or bad, and that's your response. You say to yourself, not with so many words, but this is your interpretation. This is good. This is bad. Mindfulness is basically instead saying this is this. And so it has a profound effect because it cleanses the mind. This process that was so polluted and so distorted by wanting and by greed and anger and delusion is now just clean. And it's that cleanliness that allows you to see. It allows you to see clearly in a way that you could never see if you're always judging everything, if you're always partial, using things as weapons, clinging to things as burdens and so on. You never see them clearly because you're not paying attention to them. That's why the noting works. But it's like a drop of water. One noting, you can't say, did it work? Am I enlightened yet? No. Did something profound happen? One noting isn't going to bring profound change. I mean, it is a profound thing to do, but on a very minute level. And so what it takes is gathering up these drops of water. Drops of water, it can actually flood an entire village if you have enough of them. If you note enough times. I had one teacher talk about once about how many times. He said something about how many times do you have to note before you become enlightened? That he figured there is theoretically an actual number for each person. But it's just not, I don't think that's a great way to look at it, because if you sit counting how many times, you're not actually being mindful. But it is about quantity as much as it is quality. It takes time, it takes effort. If you do intensive practice, you have a lot of quantity and a lot of quality. It's not even just about numbers, because two people can note the same number of times and have very different results. If someone is also engaged in counterproductive activities, noting isn't going to save you. If you do noting more spread out, if you just practice once a day, twice a day, as opposed to practicing 10 times a day, the number is not the most important point. My advice to you, if you haven't done the at-home course, that's a great place to start. If you have done the at-home course, find a way to do intensive practice. If you can't find a way to do intensive practice at a meditation center, then you can still benefit. You just have to be vigilant, dedicated, persistent, patient, most importantly, mindful. We talk about being discouraged, but you have to understand that being discouraged is an important object of mindfulness. It's an important result of the practice, because discouraged means you had expectations and they weren't met. And what you're learning is not that meditation doesn't meet your expectations. What you're learning is that expectations are a cause for stress and suffering because of the discouragement. This is an important lesson that mindfulness helps to show you. So you take it as a lesson. Focus on being discouraged, the fact that you feel like your practice is not fruitful. No. Forget about the practice. Focus on these emotions, because these are what are problematic. Being discouraged about anything is the problem, not the thing that you're discouraged about.
Bante, here is the next question. During sitting meditation, How should I decide whether to note the falling and rising of the abdomen, or to note other sensations? Should I note other sensations in between rising and falling? Should I note other sensations only when they are distracting, like in walking meditation? Should I keep other sensations in my field of awareness while noting the abdomen?
I would say you should rarely note physical sensations at all, if ever. And yes, so only if they're incredibly distracting, like if you have an itchy nose, or if you have tension in the shoulders, like that's really uncomfortable. Otherwise, physical sensations aren't a really important thing at all. I wouldn't pay much attention to them whatsoever. I don't think they should be your focus. It's interesting how many people, I think a lot of people coming from other traditions, the Goenka tradition talks about these, so I won't go into any opinion on their tradition, but it's not at all a part of what we are interested in having you focus on. The things you should really focus on noting are things like pain, pleasure, calm. When these arise, you have to note them until they disappear for sure. Or after a long time, if they don't disappear, then you can go back to the rising and falling. But when you talk about sensations, they're not that interesting. They're just always happening. They're always there. Sure, you could learn a little bit about them, but you're mostly likely just going to be distracted. And because they're so slow to change, it's not as easy to see impermanent suffering and non-self. There's not much meaning behind them. Much better to focus on the things that really make you react, the feelings of pain, pleasure, calm, thoughts about the past and future, and the hindrances, liking, disliking, drowsiness, distraction, doubt. If none of those things is there, unless you're seeing images or colors or something, or have some weird thing happen, just always go back to the stomach rising and falling. You don't have to note other sensations, and absolutely don't note things in between the rising and falling. There's no benefit to that. Not a magic trick where if you note everything, something good happens. Noting is to create clarity of mind. In that sense, it's not about quantity. You can't rush it. There's no shortcuts that you get by just randomly noting things. Try and stay focused and always come back to the rising and falling.
Ante, here is the next question. If one is born into this life having attained stream entry in their last life, what characteristics will they display as children?
They'll be quite different from most other children. They won't be inclined, the most obvious is they won't be inclined to breaking the 5 precepts. It's probably the most obvious. They'll just have a lot less anger, a lot less greed, and a lot less delusion than other kids. They'll be thoughtful and compassionate, inclined to help others, inclined to sacrifice themselves at the need of others. They'll be have good relationships with their parents. Generally patient and grateful to their parents, that sort of thing. They'll be drawn towards Buddhism, drawn towards meditation. I don't think there's any surefire way because it's very difficult to tell another person's state of purity. It's easier to tell a state of impurity, to notice if someone is angry, greedy, deluded. That's much easier. It's much harder to see how deeply one is lacking those very things. Mostly we try not to judge others, try and take people at face value and help them as is appropriate without getting too invested in their issues. Try and associate with people who seem to be pure, clear, and interested in good things. Mostly focus on your own qualities of mind.
Bhante, we've passed the second hour for today, so we will now conclude our session. I just want to say thanks to everyone that took part in our session today, everyone on YouTube, everyone on Discord, our volunteers that helped lead and organize the questions, Delaware, and edit, and my greatest gratitude that I want to express towards Venerable Dhamma for spreading the Buddha's dispensation further for us and for his Dhammic wisdom. Thank you, Bhante.
Yes, thank you all for coming. Thank you, of course, to Bitsu, Delaware, Austin, Siri Chando, Edith, Mila, Lara, stalwarts, people who stuck it out for the 2 hours, and everyone else who was a part of the group, people who helped with the reading, people who joined the audience, everyone who asked questions. Obviously, it's a great thing that you do for yourself, most importantly. Don't feel selfish that you seek to help yourself. If we can help by answering questions and it's helpful for you, well, that's the most important thing. But the great thing about this sort of meeting, this sort of medium, it has its flaws, it has its drawbacks, but the great thing about it is it's so public. When you ask a question, you're also helping other people who may have had similar questions or who benefit from questions they didn't even think they should ask. So much appreciation for people who have the confidence to have the initiative to ask questions. It's not something that everyone has. It shows keenness of interest and confidence and energy that someone who is too complacent or muddled in mind would not be able to do. Don't be afraid to ask questions. It can be a good habit to develop, be able to ask good questions. That being said, none of this, none of the activity that we do here will ever have a deep impact on your mind in the same way as the practice of mindfulness will. We should never be complacent that somehow these sessions constitute our practice of Buddhism. They really don't. We talk about how great it is, and it is a great thing, and it's so pure and beneficial. there's so much good that comes from being here, obviously, for all of us. But if we stop there, if we let this be our good, we haven't even scratched the surface. Like we've read the menu. We're sitting here to go at reading the menu for 2 hours. During the time that you spend this 2 hours, obviously you can, and many of us are cultivating mindfulness periodically throughout the 2 hours. So there is that. But without that, and without the further commitment to practice and put into practical application these concepts, we haven't even done more than read the menu. So this is my exhortation for this week, is to not be content with book learning, not even be content with asking questions or listening to answers. All of this is well and good, a great part of our Buddhist practice, but it'll never be the core. It'll never be sufficient. It should all be a catalyst encouraging us to go further, cultivate actual clarity of mind and wisdom that can only come from focusing on our experiences here and now. So please, if you're at all inclined to learning more about this practice, please do take up these free resources that we have, the free at-home course, the free intensive courses even. You can come all the way to the forest. We'll even pay for a taxi to get you here from the airport. I had someone who was so kind, generous to offer this as a service, that we took it up as the organization to even pay for people's taxi. Like it's all covered. You just get to the airport and we'll get you here. All free. Better than free. Free food, free Dhamma, free lodging, free taxi. Take advantage of all of this to not let this moment pass you by. Have the inclination, and if you have confidence in what we do, obviously some people are going to prefer other techniques or be concerned about the nature of this technique and react negatively to it. And so if it's not your cup of tea, that's fine. No hard feelings. But if you're at all interested, well, this is what we have, and this is what we push. Don't think that we are focused on these sessions. This is not our focus. Our focus is teaching actual meditation practice and guiding people through courses. So much appreciation for those people who have started out on these courses and people who are inclined to take them. If you haven't, well, that's your next step. For all the benefit of all the practice of mindfulness that all of us have undertaken, and all of the interest in the Buddha's teaching, cultivation of the Buddha's teaching, dissemination of the Buddha's teaching, all of the practice that we have done of good and wholesome things on this occasion, on past occasions, and then throughout our whole life, all the good deeds that we have done in past lives that allowed us to be reborn as a human being with sound mind and body in the time of the Buddha Sasana, all very rare opportunities. All of that greatness that has led us here, along with the greatness of the Buddha, the greatness of the Dhamma, the greatness of the Sangha. May all these things protect us and give to us a satisfying life, a life that is full and sound and capable of cultivation of further good things. May you all live long, healthy, happy lives with the strength to meet whatever challenges come your way. May your happiness extend at the moment of death and into future lives. May you be always connected with the Buddha Sasana in whatever place you are born, in whatever life you find yourself. May your mind be fixed and focused on the cultivation of good things, the cultivation of ethics, concentration, and wisdom. And through the practice of the Buddha's teaching, may you all find peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. attaining the path, fruition, and nibbana. Sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu. Sadhu.